Introduction. Human nature has been sold short. A higher nature which includes the need for meaningful work, for responsibility, for creativeness, for being fair and just, for doing what is worthwhile and for preferring to do it well. Abraham Maslow. Psyche and Management. Whether you are a professional, an entrepreneur, a middle manager, a writer, or a student who wants to overcome problems with procrastination, or if you simply want to be more efficient in completing complex and challenging projects, this program will help you get results. If you are organized in your larger work projects, but find that the small, essential tasks of everyday living get ignored, the Now Habit will help you set priorities for, start, and complete these tasks as well. If you are a professional whose busy schedule doesn't allow for leisure time, the Now Habit strategic program will legitimize guilt-free play while it improves the quality and efficiency of your work. If you suffer from extreme panic and blocks when confronted by pressure to perform, this book will show you how to overcome the initial terror so you can get started. It will teach you to use empowering inner dialogue that leads to responsible choices, while avoiding ambivalent messages such as you should and you have to. The typical procrastinator completes most assignments on time, but the pressure of doing work at the last minute causes unnecessary anxiety and diminishes the quality of the end result. Procrastination is a problem that we all have in some areas of our lives, be it balancing the budget, filing a complicated legal brief, or painting the spare bedroom. Anything we have delayed in favor of more pressing or pleasurable pursuits. We all have tasks and goals we attempt to delay or totally escape. From procrastinator to producer, the procrastination habit catches people in a vicious cycle. Get overwhelmed, feel pressured, fear failure, try harder, work longer, feel resentful, lose motivation, and then procrastinate. The cycle starts with the pressure of being overwhelmed and ends with an attempt to escape through procrastination. As long as you're caught in the cycle, there is no escape. You can't even enjoy the recuperative and creative benefits of guilt-free leisure time. Suddenly, any time spent on play, and even time spent on more enjoyable work, feels like an uneasy shirking from what you should be doing. By negatively affecting the way you think and feel about work, leisure, yourself, and your chances for success, procrastination becomes a part of your identity. Instead, you can cultivate the Now Habit, the ability to put aside the fear of failure, the terror of feeling overwhelmed, and low self-esteem, and focus your mind on what you can start now. The skills and strategies of the Now Habit program will let you think of yourself as a producer, feel like a producer, and act like a producer. A new definition of procrastination. Dozens of books offer pop psychology theories about why people procrastinate. They encourage self-criticism by giving you additional negative labels, and they imply that you're lazy by making greater demands for discipline and organization. But there's a big difference between just diagnosing what's wrong and providing a system that enables you to correct it. People who have been procrastinating for years on major life goals are already pretty good at self-criticism. What they need are positive, practical techniques for getting beyond the stumbling blocks and onto achieving their goals. Some books offer prosaic advice such as break it into small pieces or set priorities. You already know this. You've heard the advice, you have the knowledge, you may even have paid dearly for it. But this kind of advice isn't helpful because it misses the point. You would do these things if you could. If it were that simple. People don't procrastinate just to be ornery or because they're irrational. They procrastinate because it makes sense, given how vulnerable they feel to criticism, failure, and their own perfectionism. To overcome procrastination, you need a positive attitude about the human spirit. This spirit's inherent motivation and curiosity has gotten us out of our caves and into condos, up from the comfort of crawling to the risks of standing and walking. The human spirit drives us to what Maslow calls our need for meaningful work, for responsibility, and for creativeness. If we can harness it, it will ease the fears that cause procrastination and open entirely new horizons for human achievement. The Now Habit is based on the fact that somewhere in your life there are leisure activities and forms of work that you choose to do without hesitation. You are more than a procrastinator. You do not procrastinate 24 hours a day. When you turn your attention toward what you love to do, activities that foster your spontaneity, motivation, and curiosity, you know that you are more than a procrastinator, more than just lazy. With these experiences, you can begin to shed your identity as a procrastinator and reconnect with your innate human drive to produce and make a contribution. If early training has caused you to associate work with pain and humiliation, then just approaching an intimidating or unpleasant task can bring on a reliving of criticism, not only from your current boss but from parents, previous bosses, and teachers. Every insecurity bubbles up to your consciousness as you think about working on some project you feel you're no good at. Pain, resentment, hurt, and fear of failure have become associated with certain kinds of tasks. When life seems to hold too many of these tasks, it's as if you're driving with the brakes on. You've lost your motivation and doubt your own inner drive to get things done. At this point, your self-criticism seems justified. You're likely to think of yourself as a chronic procrastinator, someone doomed to experience anxiety and self-reproach when faced with certain kinds of projects. Your first step toward breaking the procrastination habit and becoming a producer involves redefining procrastination and coming to a new understanding of how and why we use it. Procrastination is not the cause of our problems with accomplishing tasks. It is an attempt to resolve a variety of underlying issues, including low self-esteem, perfectionism, fear of failure and of success, indecisiveness, an imbalance between work and play, ineffective goal setting, and negative concepts about work and yourself. A complete treatment of procrastination must address the underlying blocked needs that cause a person to resort to procrastination. The Now Habit starts with a new definition. Procrastination is a mechanism for coping with the anxiety associated with starting or completing any task or decision. From this definition, it follows that those most vulnerable to procrastination are those who feel the most threatened by difficulty in starting a project, criticism, failure, and the loss of other opportunities that may result from committing to one project. The Now Habit, advice such as just do it, try harder, and get organized is based on the old definition. Your problem is procrastination. If only you weren't so lazy you could do it. Well-meaning parents, teachers, writers, and friends will worsen the problem by adding, this is a really tough job. You're going to have to work really hard. No fooling around. No time for friends and vacations until this is completed. The message they communicate is, life is dull and hard. There's no time for fun. Work is dreadful, yet it must be done. This old model of work and life is similar to Woody Allen's Life is Hard, and Then You Die, or the Puritan belief life is difficult. You need to learn discipline. This program is based on more positive definitions of life, work, human potential, and procrastination that are more in keeping with the positive psychology of Abraham Maslow than with Sigmund Freud. It has greater faith in human nature, and therefore it goes beyond the typical how-to book by making you aware of the deeper anxieties about failure, perfectionism, and criticism that lead you to procrastinate. The Now Habit program emphasizes healing the underlying self-alienation, the working against yourself, that results from early training and cultural conditioning. It cuts through the crippling assumptions of the Puritan work ethic, that your production determines your worth, and the negative Freudian views of human drives, that a lower self must be subdued and disciplined by society. Instead, the Now Habit reestablishes a working relationship within yourself that lessens inner conflict and allows you to engage your whole self in your task. By giving you the tools to create inner safety and positive inner dialogue, it helps you to lessen the fear of being imperfect and enables you to take risks and start sooner. Because practical application of this positive philosophy to work situations is so rare, you will find few direct references listed in this book. The underpinnings of this book are in somewhat less practical, but seminal, works such as Matthew Fox's Original Blessing, Jean Shinoda Boland's The Tao of Psychology, Synchronicity and the Self, Dan Goleman's Emotional Intelligence, Martin Seligman's Authentic Happiness, and Gerald Jampolsky's Love is Letting Go of Fear. The Now Habit is a strategic system, that is, it goes beyond how-to advice and presents a plan based on the dynamics of procrastination and motivation. The program shows you how to shift gears into a higher level of functioning so you can go faster more efficiently. It shows you how scheduling more guilt-free play in your life can attack the underlying causes of procrastination by lowering resentment toward work, making it easier to start working, improving the quality of work, and stirring motivation. With this strategy, you will be able to work virtually free of stress and enjoy your leisure time free of guilt. The Now Habit program will provide you with 10 powerful tools for overcoming procrastination. 1. Creating Safety will show you how to put a psychological safety net under your high-wire act so that you can lessen your fear of failure and learn how to bounce back from mistakes with renewed purpose. 2. Reprogramming negative attitudes through positive self-talk will help you to identify your negative messages to yourself and discover how they adversely affect you, while replacing them with positive phrasing that directs your energy toward task-oriented thoughts and rapid solutions. 3. Using the symptom to trigger the cure will show you how to use old habits to evoke and strengthen the formation of new, positive habits. 4. Guilt-free play will teach you how to strategically schedule your leisure time in order to shift your focus from work to play, thereby creating a subconscious urge to return to work. 5. Three-dimensional thinking and the reverse calendar will show you how to control the terror of being overwhelmed by important tasks by creating a step-by-step calendar of your path to achievement. with adequate time to rest and to fully appreciate your accomplishments. 6. Making worry work for you will show you how developing plans for coping with distractions will help you achieve your goals and strengthen your ability to face the worst that could happen. 7. The unschedule will let you see the freedom awaiting you through pre-scheduled guilt-free play. Will create a realistic image of the amount of time available, and will give you a built-in time clock for recording quality time on projects to let you see how much you've accomplished. 8. Setting realistic goals will help you to clear your mind of guilt-producing goals that cannot be worked on in the present, and will direct your energies toward the few worthwhile goals that deserve your attention now. 9. Working in the flow state will bring you beyond stress and low motivation to a state of focused energy, interest, and concentration within 2 minutes or less, letting you know that regardless of how you feel about your project, within moments you will be working at your most productive and creative levels. 10. Controlled setbacks will prepare you for setbacks so that you quickly turn them into opportunities. Anticipate the temptation to procrastinate, and build persistence into your overall plan for achievement. Expect a miraculous change. While many of the strategies described here are not new, what you will find to be new, even revolutionary, is that finally you have the means to apply these powerful strategies to the practical issues of your life. Armed with techniques for focusing on results and for recognizing and avoiding old pitfalls, you will discover yourself feeling positive and confident in situations that previously caused stress and procrastination. You will even discover that you are less critical and more supportive of yourself, capable of replacing old criticisms with positive, task-oriented directives and rechanneling the frustration of procrastination into successful production. Since completing my doctoral program 30 years ago, I have worked with thousands of clients and hundreds of organizations in creating a strategy that has helped participants to dramatically improve performance, get freedom from destructive behavior, and enhance self-esteem and confidence. I have used the Now Habit tools to find the time to write articles for the New England Journal of Medicine, Science Digest, and Reader's Digest, and to write 4 books in 15 to 20 quality hours a week while maintaining a commitment to guilt-free time for friends, family, and the training necessary to run 3 half marathons. This same system has been used successfully by clients who considered themselves to be recalcitrant procrastinators. We will not be guilty of Mark Twain's complaint, everybody talks about the weather, but nobody does anything about it. While we can't do much about the weather, we can start today to do something about procrastination. The Now Habit program for quality work and guilt-free play has worked for me and my clients and seminar participants, and it can work for you. Chapter 1: Why We Procrastinate. The healthy individual has an appetite for fruitful activity and for a high quality of life. George Bernard Shaw. Your strategic program begins with identifying your procrastination patterns so you can apply the appropriate techniques for replacing them with the effective work patterns of producers. Warning signs of procrastination. These 6 warning signs will help you quickly determine if you have significant difficulties with procrastination, goal achievement, or inefficient work habits. 1. Does life feel like a long series of obligations that cannot be met? Do you keep an impossibly long to-do list? Talk to yourself in have-tos and shoulds. Feel powerless, with no sense of choice. Feel agitated, pressured, continually fearful of being caught procrastinating. Suffer from insomnia and have difficulty unwinding at night, on weekends, and on vacations. 2. Are you unrealistic about time? Do you talk about starting on projects in vague terms such as sometime next week or in the fall? Lose track of how you spend your time. Have an empty schedule without a clear sense of commitments, plans, sub-goals, and deadlines. Chronically arrive late at meetings and dinners. Fail to take into account the actual time it takes to drive across town during rush hour. 3. Are you vague about your goals and values? Do you find it difficult to stay committed to any one person or project? Have difficulty knowing what you really want for yourself, but are clear about what you should want? Get easily distracted from a goal by another plan that seems to be free of problems and obstacles. Lack the ability to distinguish between what's the most important use of your time and what's not. 4. Are you unfulfilled, frustrated, depressed? Do you have life goals that you've never completed or even attempted? Fear always being a procrastinator. Find that you're never satisfied with what you accomplish. Feel deprived, always working or feeling guilty about not working. Continually wonder, why did I do that? Or what's wrong with me? 5. Are you indecisive and afraid of being criticized for making a mistake? Do you delay completing projects because you try to make them perfect? Fear taking responsibility for decisions because you're afraid of being blamed if something goes wrong. Demand perfection even on low-priority work. Expect to be above mistakes and criticism. Worry endlessly about what if something goes wrong. 6. Are low self-esteem and lack of assertiveness holding you back from becoming productive? Do you blame outside events for your failures because you're afraid to admit to any deficiencies? Believe I am what I do or I am my net worth. Feel ineffective in controlling your life. Fear being judged and found wanting. If you can relate to most of these categories, the chances are you already know that you have real problems with procrastination, time management, or workaholism. If you see only some of these warning signs in yourself, you may be procrastinating in some areas of your life while remaining in control in most areas. If you've ever been caught in a procrastination cycle, you know the personal cost you pay in your life. Missed deadlines for job and school applications, lost sales because of a failure to follow up on calls, and broken relationships due to continual lateness and canceled plans. But even if you avoid these extremes and can responsibly meet obligations and deadlines, you may still suffer from problems with procrastination. The fact is that most of us who consider ourselves procrastinators meet deadline and avoid serious penalties. But we feel so rushed, so pressured, and so unhappy with the results that we have to admit we have inordinate difficulties with any frightening or unpleasant task. Our real distress comes from the constant anxiety of delaying, from guilt about the inferior quality of projects completed at the last minute, and from deep regrets about life's missed opportunities. A positive view of the human spirit. Why do you procrastinate? The most frequent response to this question is because I'm lazy. Yet even the worst procrastinators have motivation and energy for some areas of their lives: sports, hobbies, reading, taking care of others, music, dancing, political debate, investments, surfing the internet, or gardening. So-called procrastinators can be found in every walk of life, accomplishing much in those arenas where they have chosen to devote themselves, but totally unable to get started in others. The now habit perspective does not accept that laziness, disorganization, or any other character defect is the reason you procrastinate, nor does it accept the assumption that people in general are innately lazy, and therefore need pressure to motivate them. The now habit is based on the positive psychology of Dr. Martin Seligman, on what Dr. Susan Kobasa of the University of Chicago calls those psychological orientations that emphasize human initiative and resilience. Her research on the hardy personality tells us that the more optimistic interpretations of human functioning are often left out of theories about how people cope. Likewise, in Anatomy of an Illness and the Healing Heart, the late Norman Cousins informs us that modern medicine has virtually ignored the positive aspects of the body's resilient healing system, preferring to focus on disease. He says that humor and positive emotions and thoughts have healing potential. The now habit applies a similar positive attitude about the human spirit to the problem of procrastination. If human nature has this ability to be so positive and active, then why do we procrastinate? You might ask. One explanation is offered by Denise Waitley, the author of The Psychology of Winning and the Joy of Working, who defines procrastination as a neurotic form of self-defensive behavior aimed at protecting one's self-worth. That is, we procrastinate when we fear a threat to our sense of worth and independence. We only act lazy when our natural drive for fruitful activity is threatened or suppressed. No one does it to feel bad, says Waitley, but to temporarily relieve deep inner fears. What are the deep inner fears that cause us to seek such unproductive forms of relief? Dr. Theodore Rubin in his book Compassion and Self-Hate suggests that it is the fear of failure, the fear of being imperfect, and the fear of impossible expectations that prevent us from acting on and attaining humanly possible goals and relationships. Having a fear of failure means you believe that even the smallest error could be evidence that you are a worthless and awful person. Having a fear of being imperfect means that it is difficult for you to accept yourself as you are, imperfect and, therefore, perfectly human, and so you interpret any criticism, rejection, or judgment by others as a threat to your very tenuous grasp on perfection. Having a fear of impossible expectations means fearing that even after you've worked hard and achieved the goals set for you, your only reward will be continually higher and more difficult goals to achieve, with no rest and no time to savor your achievements. These fears, Dr. Rubin says, keep us from reaching a level of life where we feel compassion and respect ourselves now, for who and where we are now. This compassion for ourselves is essential in overcoming the underlying causes of procrastination. It means understanding that procrastination is not a character defect, rather, it is an attempt, albeit an unsatisfactory one, at coping with the often incapacitating fear of having our worth held up for judgment. The fear of judgment is the key fear that stems from over-identifying who you are, your worth as a person, with your work. From this fear follows the counterproductive drive toward perfectionism, severe self-criticism, and the fear that you must deprive yourself of leisure time in order to satisfy some unseen judge. Our worst critic, ourselves. Perched nervously on the sofa in my waiting room was a young woman who looked very much like a small, lost child. She clutched her handbag tightly and sat scrunched forward on the edge of her seat as if in pain. When I called her name, Claire brightened and tried to smile, but it came across as anxious and awkward. As she stood, I could see that Claire was a tall, well-dressed woman in her late 20s who could rapidly drop her childlike appearance and look her true age and size. Once we reached my office, Claire resumed her childlike look. Hunched over, she said meekly, I may be fired from my job. I've received a poor performance evaluation. They'll fire me if I don't improve. I feel awful. I've never failed at anything in my entire life. This job was Claire's first responsible position, a promising one with a rapidly expanding company involved in marketing medical products. For more than 30 minutes she poured out her problems with procrastination. A story of embarrassment, humiliation, and self-contempt, about constant anxiety, continual feelings of being out of control, missed deadlines, and rushed projects that left no time to check for obvious errors. I just couldn't face all the demands they made on me. There was so much they wanted me to learn, Claire told me. There were continual interruptions and no clear guidelines. I didn't know what they wanted from me. I felt so stupid, so incompetent. After a while I just couldn't get started, even though I really wanted to. I was so afraid of making a mistake. Whenever I tried to begin one of my projects, I'd hear my boss's voice telling me how to do it right and how important it was. My way of doing things is so different from his. When I first got the job, everyone was eager for me to start. There was a huge backlog from Janet, the person who had my job before me, but I'd just begin to get into it, developing my own ideas. When someone would ask me how I was doing, if I showed them my work, they'd proceed to point out how tough it was going to be to fill Janet's shoes. After a while I stopped asking for help and stopped showing my work to anyone. When I'd get stuck on something, I'd get so nervous and depressed I'd just put it away. Take a coffee break, or talk to someone about the weather. Anything to try and get away from the nervousness. But my problem didn't start with this job. Procrastinating isn't new for me. I've had this problem since grade school. I knew that my difficulties with procrastination would always catch up with me. I have an ulcer that started in high school. Even then I would worry about turning in a project for fear that it would be mediocre. Just average. As Claire spoke the words mediocre, just average, a look of disgust crossed her face. I decided this would be a good time to interrupt. She had spent quite a bit of time describing herself as the victim and the scared, helpless child. But at this moment she had become the judge and the critic. Not very positive roles, but ones with more energy and potential for movement than the part of her that felt so devastated by a poor performance evaluation. Just average is pretty awful for you, isn't it, Claire? I asked. It makes you feel miserable, as if you're worthless. Sounds as if you can be pretty tough on yourself. You expect all your work to be superior, maybe even perfect, and when it isn't, you get disgusted with yourself. It's as if your projects become more than just work to be taken care of. For you they become reflections of your worth as a person. I would bet that when your work is judged average, you tell yourself you're bad, as if you, not just your work, are being judged. Where did you learn to talk to yourself that way? My question puzzled Claire, and she took a moment to think. It's been that way ever since I can remember. I've been raised to believe that you should be the best in everything you try. Anything less is failure. If I failed, I'd feel like a failure. Then Claire told me about where she had learned to think of herself as part judge and part lazy child. I'm the youngest of 4. My 2 brothers and sister are fairly successful. And of course my father's really successful and wealthy. And my mother is well liked and very good at everything she does. I've always felt as if I had to play catch up and that I never could. They were always so much better at everything. I think I would have liked to go into medicine, but that's so competitive anyway, and my oldest brother had already chosen that field. Ever since I can remember, they all made fun of me if I asked for help with my homework. I was always expected to do well and have no problems. I suppose they thought they were showing me how bright I was. There was never any praise for my accomplishments, even when I worked very hard. But there was plenty of criticism when I'd blow it and get a B in history or something. I always felt as if someone was looking over my shoulder, worried about how well I was doing or how smart I was. All my life I've been told I have to discipline myself to be really good at the piano, at ballet, at science. I felt I had to force myself to do these things for them even though I wanted to be outside playing with the other kids. It seemed so important to my parents that I be good at something special. I wanted them to be happy, so I really tried for them. I've done okay, but never really special. Never someone they could be proud of. No matter how hard I'd try, I'd get so nervous on tests and interviews that I could never do my best. I've always felt that if there wasn't so much pressure, just a little more time, I could do really well. But it always turns out average. I hate being average, but isn't it that way for everybody? This early family pattern is typical of many procrastinators. Praise is often withheld because it might go to your head, leaving the child with a sense that their efforts are never good enough. There seems to be no way of pleasing their parents or teachers. Early in life they learn that all they can expect from finishing a project is criticism or so-called constructive feedback on how it might be improved. What's clearly being communicated is, there's no rest for you. You'll always need to keep trying. Life and work are hard. It won't be easy for you. You have a lot more work to do before you can rest on your laurels. You'd better get used to things getting tough because adulthood is even worse than childhood. And while you're out having fun, Some catastrophe is lurking around the corner, waiting to surprise you. Her early training taught Claire that part of her was lazy and that this part would need discipline, pressure, and threats in order to do all the hard work that awaited her. She learned to take for granted that a judgmental and authoritarian part of her would have to push and threaten a lazy and childlike part. For Claire, being in constant conflict with herself was the only way she knew how to be. I wanted to challenge at least two of the counterproductive assumptions Claire's story revealed: the feeling that she had to force herself, that there needed to be an inner conflict, and that this constant conflict is normal, the way everybody lives, as if it's part of human nature to be lazy. I guess that's the way it is for many people, Claire, I said. But believe me, it's not that way for everybody, and I don't believe that it was that way for you all of the time. I'd bet that at one time, when you were a little girl, everything you did was just fine, perfect in fact. Every sound you uttered was greeted with applause and a look of encouragement, a reassuring smile that you would do just fine. Everybody gave you time to learn in your way, at your own pace, in effect saying, "We love you just the way you are." Tears welled up in Claire's eyes and she wept, then apologized. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cry. I promised myself I wouldn't cry. I feel so stupid. I don't even know why I'm crying." Could it be that it's been a long time since you felt that unconditional acceptance? I asked. Maybe it's also been a long time since you were that approving of yourself. Notice how quickly you brought in that judging voice that says, "It's stupid to cry. There's no logical reason to cry. Now stop that and apologize." You've learned that voice very well, maybe too well. Where did you learn to talk to yourself in such a tough, critical way? I wanted to alert Claire to her negative self-talk, which she could ultimately learn to control even when she couldn't control what others were saying to her. Feeling like a victim had become so much a part of her identity that she simply assumed that the voice of the critic was coming from outside herself. I was asking her to notice that she was the authoritarian judge. I explained to Claire that she probably learned that demanding voice is an attempt to ensure acceptance from her parents. To do this, she had to accept their belief that part of her could be bad, and that it would need constant watching and pressure to be made to work, even when it didn't want to. Thus Claire learned to talk to herself, not as a loving parent, but as a threatening and parental judge. Claire's problems are prime examples of the consequences of what Alice Miller, in her book For Your Own Good, Hidden Cruelty in Child Rearing and the Roots of Violence, calls poisonous pedagogy, which teaches the child low self-esteem and negative attitudes toward work. Claire had learned her attitudes about work and her abilities when she was too young to think for herself. Now that she was an adult, I wanted her to decide consciously which attitudes and assumptions made sense to her. I also felt it was important for her to know the theories on which I based my approach to her problems. I told her that my work was based on a positive attitude about the human spirit, a belief that work and improvement are natural for the human body and mind, and that problems such as procrastination usually come about from suppression of that drive. Once we had redefined some basic premises about work and procrastination in our first session, the next step was to discover the negative assumptions that underlay Claire's procrastination. I asked Claire to keep track of when and why she procrastinated for a few days to make her aware of when the old views were most likely to lead her into negative patterns. When she found herself procrastinating, she was to be alert to her habit of using procrastination to escape inner conflict and anxiety. From the entries in her log, Claire made a list of her most frequent negative self-statements. From these we developed positive challenges to replace them and to redirect her focus toward the task at hand, rather than to questions of her ability or worth. We still had a lot of work to do to rebuild Claire's confidence and to prepare her for negative feedback from her boss. But once she had a strategy that got rid of her worst critic, herself, we were able to lessen Claire's resistance to authority, fear of failure, perfectionism, and fear of success. With the use of the Now Habit system, Claire got beyond her image of herself as a procrastinator. She was able to focus on her accomplishments, her strengths, her innate drive for quality work, her intellectual curiosity, and her desire to improve whatever situation she was in. Having become her own source of approval, Claire grew less dependent on external judgments of her worth and was able to face work without procrastinating. She had unlearned her need to procrastinate and could now start thinking, feeling, and acting like a producer.